2:34 a.m. In the black waters of the eastern Pacific, 240 nautical miles west of Acapulco, a U.S. Coast Guard HC-144 Ocean Sentry aircraft detected a thermal signature that defied explanation. A vessel, 340 feet long, moving at 8 knots with no transponder, no identification, radiating heat like an industrial complex. Its name, painted in faded letters across the bow, La Reina del Mar, the Queen of the Sea. But this was no merchant ship. This was a floating methamphetamine empire, a narco laboratory built to poison 2 continents. Inside its massive steel hull were 9 active chemical synthesis labs, 14 industrial reactors processing precursor chemicals from China, cargo holds stacked floor to ceiling with 47 tons of finished crystal meth, 18 tons of raw pseudoephedrine, and barrels containing 340,000 liters of liquid methamphetamine ready for distribution. A toxic cargo worth more than $8.7 billion. Below deck in the vessel's converted cargo spaces, 180 civilians worked as chemical slaves. Among them were 34 Americans, kidnapped chemists from California pharmaceutical companies, unemployed fishermen from San Diego promised legitimate work, a marine engineer from Texas who answered a Craigslist ad. They were forced to work 18-hour shifts in toxic fumes. Those who complained were beaten. Those who tried to escape were thrown overboard. At the center of this nightmare stood Hector El Químico Salazar, the chemist, a 47-year-old fugitive from Sinaloa with a PhD in industrial chemistry from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. In just 6 years, his organization had flooded the American West Coast with 230 tons of methamphetamine, fueling addiction crises in 19 states. His innovation was simple and devastating. Why smuggle drugs across borders when you can manufacture them in international waters? For 14 months, intelligence agencies tracked rumors of La Reina del Mar. Satellite imagery showed suspicious vessel movements. Intercepted communications mentioned the floating lab, but every time Coast Guard cutters got close, the ship vanished into storms or jurisdictional gray zones. Salazar taunted American authorities in encrypted messages. "You control the land. I control the ocean. Your laws end at your coastline. Mine never do." But on the night of April 16, 2025, everything changed. A breakthrough came not from satellites or wiretaps, but from a desperate message. At 11:47 p.m., a distress signal transmitted on an emergency maritime frequency. Coordinates, a single word, help! The signal came from inside La Reina del Mar. Someone aboard had smuggled a maritime emergency beacon and activated it. DEA analysts triangulated the location. U.S. Coast Guard confirmed the vessel's position. Within 18 minutes, classified intelligence reached the White House Situation Room. At 12:23 a.m. Eastern Time, President Donald J. Trump received the briefing. A floating meth factory, American hostages, $8.7 billion in drugs destined for U.S. cities. The president listened, his jaw set, then spoke with absolute clarity. "This ends tonight. I want that ship taken. I want those Americans home. And I want Salazar in American handcuffs by sunrise. Authorization code Iron Tide. Execute immediately." At 12:31 a.m., Operation Iron Tide became active. The largest coordinated maritime drug interdiction in DEA history, the most complex floating lab raid ever attempted. The mission that would either rescue 34 Americans or become a catastrophic failure broadcast worldwide. If you believe American agencies should destroy these narco empires no matter where they hide, tap like and comment, bring them home. At 12:44 a.m., aboard U.S. Coast Guard cutter Stratton, 80 nautical miles from the target, Commander Sarah Mitchell received flash orders. Intercept La Reina del Mar. Prepare for hostile boarding. DEA tactical teams inbound via helicopter. Rules of engagement. Weapons free if crew resists. Priority 1, extract American hostages. Priority 2, seize vessel and evidence. Priority 3, capture Hector Salazar alive. The Stratton, a 418-foot Legend-class national security cutter, immediately changed course. Maximum speed, 28 knots. Crew to battle stations, deck guns manned, boarding teams assembled. But the Stratton wouldn't be going alone. At 12:52 a.m., 2 MH-60 Jayhawk helicopters launched from Naval Air Station North Island, carrying 24 DEA Special Response Team operators. Elite agents trained for maritime drug interdictions, chemical lab environments, and hostage rescue under fire. Each operator carried suppressed HK-416 rifles, ballistic shields, and gas masks rated for methamphetamine vapor exposure. At 1:03 a.m., a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft reached the target area, flying at 25,000 feet, invisible and silent. Its advanced radar locked onto La Reina del Mar. Thermal cameras revealed the ship's interior layout. 9 hotspots indicating active chemical reactors. Dozens of heat signatures, crew, and hostages. The infrared image was transmitted in real time to the Stratton's operations center. Commander Mitchell studied the display. A fortress, 9 labs, crew count estimated at 90, unknown weapons, chemical hazards throughout, and somewhere in that steel labyrinth, 34 Americans waiting to be saved. At 1:19 a.m., the pieces were in position. The Stratton closing from the east, 2 helicopters inbound from the north, the Poseidon overhead providing surveillance. Mexican Navy had been notified under bilateral drug interdiction agreements. This was happening in international waters, but Mexico agreed to U.S. operational control. At 1:34 a.m., 60 nautical miles from La Reina del Mar, the crew made their move. Salazar's lookout spotted the Stratton's approach on radar. Panic spread through the ship. Orders screamed over intercoms. Guards scrambled to defensive positions with AK-47 rifles. The vessel's captain attempted to increase speed, but the overloaded ship could barely manage 9 knots. Salazar himself rushed to the bridge, his face pale in the red glow of emergency lights. He grabbed the radio and transmitted on all frequencies. "This is the merchant vessel La Reina del Mar, operating in international waters. We are not subject to U.S. jurisdiction. Any attempt to board this ship is an act of piracy under international maritime law. We are armed and will defend ourselves." Commander Mitchell's response was cold and absolute. "Attention, La Reina del Mar. You are operating a clandestine drug laboratory. You are holding American citizens against their will. You are transporting controlled substances intended for United States distribution. Under Title 46 U.S. Code Section 7503 and bilateral agreements with Mexico, this vessel is subject to U.S. Coast Guard authority. Reduce speed immediately. Prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force." Salazar's laugh crackled through the radio. "You think I fear your Coast Guard? I have 90 men on this ship. We have enough ammunition to sink your little cutter. Try to board us and your people die. Those American hostages you want to save. They'll be the first casualties when the shooting starts." But what Salazar didn't know was that the boarding had already begun. At 1:47 a.m., while Salazar was making threats over the radio, 2 DEA helicopters approached La Reina del Mar from behind, flying low over the black water with navigation lights off. Night vision pilots, stealth insertion. The vessel's radar focused forward on the Stratton, never detected the helicopters until they were directly overhead. At 1:49 a.m., 24 DEA operators fast-roped onto La Reina del Mar's stern deck. 4 ropes, 6 operators per rope, boots hitting steel in 18 seconds, suppressed weapons up, ballistic shields forming a protective wall. The ship's rear guard, 4 cartel gunmen, turned in shock. The DEA didn't announce themselves, didn't shout commands. They fired. Suppressed 5.56 rounds dropped all 4 guards before they could raise their rifles. The bodies hit the deck. The DEA was aboard. At 1:51 a.m., Team Alpha moved toward the bridge superstructure. Their mission, neutralize command and control. 6 operators, ballistic shields, flashbang grenades. They climbed an exterior ladder, reached the bridge level. Through bulletproof windows, they saw Salazar and his command crew. 8 men, armed, panicking. The team leader made a hand signal. "Breach!" One operator placed a shaped charge on the bridge door. A small explosion. The door blew inward. Flashbangs tumbled through. Deafening blasts. Blinding white light. The DEA stormed in. Salazar reached for a pistol on the control panel. Too slow. An operator tackled him. Hands behind his back. Flex cuffs. The untouchable narco-chemist was on his knees in 11 seconds. Bridge secure. Target captured. At 1:53 a.m., Team Bravo descended into the ship's interior. Their mission, locate and secure the American hostages. 12 operators moving through narrow corridors. Chemical smell burning their nostrils even through masks. Heat radiating from the lab spaces. They encountered 5 guards in a stairwell. The cartel gunmen opened fire, AK rounds sparking off steel bulkheads. The DEA returned fire, controlled bursts, precision shooting. All 5 guards down. The team continued deeper. At 1:56 a.m. they found them, the American hostages, locked in a converted cargo hold. 34 people, men and women, thin, exhausted, chemical burns on their hands and faces. When the DEA operators opened the reinforced door, a woman in her 40s collapsed, sobbing. "I'm Dr. Jennifer Hayes, San Diego. They took me 4 months ago. I thought I'd never see my daughter again." The team leader radioed the Stratton. "Package located. 34 Americans, all alive, preparing extraction." But the operation wasn't over, not even close. At 1:58 a.m., Team Charlie reached the heart of La Reina del Mar, the laboratory deck. 9 massive rooms, each one a complete methamphetamine synthesis operation. Industrial chemical reactors, ventilation systems, barrels of precursor chemicals, and 140 forced laborers. Mexican, Central American, Chinese, kidnapped just like the Americans, working in toxic conditions that would kill them within years. The DEA operators had a problem. 17 guards on the lab deck, positioned behind chemical equipment, using hostages as human shields. Any firefight risked igniting the entire ship. 47 tons of methamphetamine, thousands of liters of flammable solvents. One spark and the vessel would become an inferno. The team leader made a decision: non-lethal, gas and shock. At 2:01 a.m., the DEA deployed tear gas grenades. Chemical clouds filled the lab spaces. The guards, unprepared and unmasked, immediately began choking, blinded, gasping. The operators moved through the haze with thermal sights. They hit the guards with flashbangs and batons. Close quarters, brutal, efficient. Within 4 minutes, all 17 guards were on the deck, handcuffed, disarmed. Not one hostage harmed. Not one chemical fire started. The forced laborers stared in disbelief as American agents began cutting their restraints. At 2:07 a.m., the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Stratton pulled alongside La Reina del Mar. Boarding teams crossed on caving ladders. U.S. Coast Guard Maritime Security Response Team operators, combat medics, chemical hazard specialists, engineers. The floating narco lab was under complete American control. From first fast rope insertion to final deck secured, 16 minutes. Salazar's 90 armed crew, subdued. 34 American hostages, rescued. 140 forced laborers, freed. 9 methamphetamine laboratories, captured. 0 American casualties. But what came next would shock even the DEA veterans who thought they had seen everything. Tap subscribe now, because what they found inside those labs redefined the cartel threat. At 2:23 a.m., DEA chemical specialists entered Lab 7. What they discovered made them stop cold. This wasn't just a methamphetamine production facility, it was a research and development center. On stainless steel tables lay notebooks filled with chemical formulas, computer tablets displaying molecular structures. This lab was experimenting with synthetic opioids, fentanyl analogs, chemical compounds designed to be 100 times more potent than heroin. Small batch samples in sealed vials, each one labeled with a code and a potency rating. One vial, marked HQ-47, contained a white powder that field testing suggested was a fentanyl variant strong enough that a single grain could kill an adult. The lead chemist, a Chinese national who spoke English, was interrogated immediately. He explained that Salazar had hired him specifically to develop super-potent opioids that could be mixed into methamphetamine to increase addiction rates. The goal was to create a drug so powerfully addictive that users would be physically dependent after a single use. The chemist estimated that the formulas in Lab 7, if mass-produced, could create enough synthetic opioids to kill 340 million people, an extinction-level supply. In Lab 3, investigators found something equally disturbing. A wall covered in photographs, hundreds of them, faces, names, addresses. These were targets. Judges who had ruled against cartel members, DEA agents who had participated in major busts, prosecutors, informants, family members of people who had cooperated with American law enforcement. Salazar wasn't just manufacturing drugs, he was compiling an assassination list. Encrypted hard drives seized from the bridge would later reveal contracts with hitmen in 7 U.S. cities. Payments made in cryptocurrency, instructions for eliminations. The floating lab wasn't just an economic operation, it was the command center for a revenge campaign against everyone who had opposed the Sinaloa cartel. At 2:41 a.m., the evidence cataloging began. What the Coast Guard and DEA found aboard La Reina del Mar exceeded every worst-case scenario. 47 tons of finished crystal methamphetamine with an estimated street value of $6.2 billion. 18 tons of pseudoephedrine and ephedrine precursor chemicals sourced from factories in China worth $890 million. 340,000 liters of liquid methamphetamine stored in modified fuel tanks, ready for distribution, worth $1.7 billion. Total drug value, $8.79 billion. The largest single drug seizure in DEA history. But that wasn't all. 14 encrypted laptops containing distribution networks spanning 31 U.S. states and 14 countries. Bank account information for 89 shell companies used to launder cartel profits. Names and photographs of 67 corrupt officials, including 3 Mexican federal police commanders, 2 Port Authority administrators, and 1 U.S. Customs officer. 93 AK-47 rifles, 42 handguns, 18 RPG launchers, chemical protective equipment stolen from industrial suppliers, and in Salazar's personal cabin, $4.3 million in cash, bundled in waterproof bags. Emergency escape money that he would never get to use. At 3:12 a.m., under the glare of the Stratton's floodlights, Salazar was brought up from below deck. No longer the confident drug lord who had taunted American authorities. Now a handcuffed prisoner in an orange chemical suit, his hands covered in methamphetamine residue, his face blank with the realization that his empire had collapsed in 16 minutes. A DEA agent read him his rights. Hector Salazar, you are under arrest for manufacturing and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, kidnapping, hostage-taking, murder, and violations of the Maritime Drug Law Enforcement Act. You will be transported to San Diego to face federal charges. Do you understand these rights? Salazar said nothing. He stared at the deck. The man who claimed he controlled the ocean was standing on an American cutter, heading toward an American prison where he would spend the rest of his life. At 3:34 a.m., the rescued Americans were transferred to the Stratton. Coast Guard medics treated them for dehydration, chemical exposure, and malnutrition. Many wept. Some were too exhausted to speak. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the chemist from San Diego, held a satellite phone with shaking hands as a medic dialed her daughter's number. When the call connected, she could only whisper 4 words. "Baby, I'm coming home." At 4:07 a.m., a decision was made at the highest levels. La Reina del Mar would not be towed to port. It would not be preserved as evidence. The chemical contamination was too severe, the methamphetamine too dangerous. The vessel was a floating biohazard that could never be safely decontaminated. At 4:23 a.m., demolition charges were placed throughout the ship. In each of the 9 labs, in the cargo holds, along the hull. U.S. Navy explosive ordnance disposal specialists worked methodically. 2,000 pounds of C4 plastic explosive, enough to ensure total destruction. At 4:51 a.m., all personnel evacuated to the Stratton. The 2 vessels separated. Distance increased. 1 nautical mile. 2. At 5:03 a.m., the charges detonated. The explosion was visible for 40 miles. A fireball erupted from La Reina del Mar's midsection. The ship broke in half. Flames consumed the laboratories. Methamphetamine burned in a chemical inferno that sent toxic smoke boiling into the pre-dawn sky. Secondary explosions ripped through the hull as fuel tanks and chemical barrels ignited. Within 4 minutes, both halves of the ship slipped beneath the Pacific. The Queen of the Sea. The floating narco laboratory that Salazar had believed was untouchable. Gone. Resting in 11,000 feet of water where it could never poison anyone again. At 5:17 a.m., as the first light of dawn touched the eastern horizon, a radio transmission crackled through every frequency. Stratton Actual to all stations. Operation Irontide complete. Target vessel destroyed. All American hostages safe. Primary suspect in custody. 34 coming home. The ocean heard the message. The cartels heard the message. And in San Diego, family members who had prayed for months that their loved ones were still alive received phone calls they thought would never come. By sunrise on April 17, 2025, the Eastern Pacific was quiet again. What had begun as a desperate distress signal ended as one of the most decisive victories in the war on drugs. Operation Irontide proved that no narco empire is too big, no vessel is untouchable, no ocean is beyond American reach. Across the deck of the Stratton, rescued Americans sat wrapped in blankets, drinking water, breathing clean air for the first time in months. Coast Guard sailors stood beside them. DEA operators checked their gear. And in the brig below, Hector El Químico Salazar sat in a steel cell, his chemical empire reduced to ashes and seawater. What unfolded in those dark Pacific waters was never just about drugs. It was about 34 Americans who refused to be forgotten. It was about agents who wouldn't stop searching. It was about a nation that pursues its enemies across every ocean until justice is served. This story carries a deeper lesson. Evil doesn't just hide in the mountains or the deserts. Sometimes it floats in international waters, beyond borders, believing itself safe from consequences. And when it does, it takes courage to cross those waters. It takes determination to face chemical hazards and armed resistance. It takes precision to rescue hostages without losing a single life. That is the legacy of Operation Irontide, a reminder that American justice has no horizon, that the vulnerable will be protected, that the guilty will be caught, that courage, when combined with capability, can achieve the impossible. As dawn broke over the Pacific, the radio crackled one final transmission from Stratton's commander. To all cartel leadership monitoring this frequency, you saw what happened here. We found your floating fortress. We took your chemist. We rescued every hostage. We destroyed your laboratory. And we did it in 16 minutes. You can hide in the mountains. You can hide in the jungle. You can hide on the ocean. We will find you. We will take you. And you will answer for every American life you've destroyed. The Pacific is no longer yours. If you believe these stories of courage and justice must be told, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because the fight to protect American lives continues every day, in every ocean, and your engagement ensures these stories reach the people who need to hear them. The next operation could be happening right now, and when it does, you'll be among the first to know.